Our next presenter is Lindsay Reed, Chief Executive Officer of Minbos Resources Limited.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the kind invitation. I've been asking what your name is so that I could thank you in person, but nobody in the back room was able to inform me of that. This is a new experience for me, presenting on a screen. It's interesting not being able to see you and only see myself. I see that I have a tie that quite nicely matches my shirt. I have a headset that quite nicely matches my hair, and something that I wasn't really aware of was my eyebrows seem to be matching my suit as well. So if I can move away from trying not to be distracted from somebody who's only a moderately good-looking guy, I'll try and give you a serious presentation. Firstly, I'd like to thank Bill and the team once again for putting on an Africa Down Under in 2021 and another year which has been very, very difficult circumstances. I understand those circumstances. As you may have guessed, I'm giving you this presentation from Angola, and I'm here because of the pandemic, and I'll be here for some time longer because of the difficulties of travelling around. That said, I'll be forever grateful for the pandemic. It's allowed me to come to Angola and understand more and more about this. And this country, I think, just encapsulates ESG opportunities for me. It's in a very, very beautiful part of the planet. I haven't seen enough of it. I want to see more. The people are gracious and welcoming. I've enjoyed being here. It's so good. But there's also opportunities for prosperity in this country, many, many opportunities. It's been a difficult time for the country in the last 50 years, but that's turning and the people wanted to change. And we're here and hopefully we'll make a small contribution to making that change. I want to talk to you today about some of the opportunities that I've found since I've been here, and also give you a little bit of a head start on the small project that is the ground or the basis for which we're going to start this big journey in Angola. It's a small phosphate rock project, and it will, I think it's a small project, but it'll have a big impact. And to that extent, I've entitled our presentation, The Rock That Starts Nation, and I'll bring that up for you now. So next slide, please. There we go. Just the formality to start off. I think if you read that, we'll find that we claim to have 2 competent people, and we put a disclaimer in there to account for the rest of us. But I'll let you read that at your leisure. The vision is simple. We want to build a high-impact nutrient production and distribution business for Central Africa. High impact in that it will affect people's lives, not just directly in our business, but in the whole region, and it'll make a transformational change. In nutrients, any nutrient, we're starting with phosphate, but we will get involved in any nutrient that will have a positive impact on the planet, on the people, and on the prosperity of this region. There are many, many nutrients. They're usually grouped into 3 categories: primary nutrients, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, which the plant sort of gets from the environment, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, more commonly referred to, and I will refer to it a lot today, as NPK. And then the secondary nutrients, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and many, many micronutrients, depending on your list, half a dozen or more: boron, copper, molybdenum, zinc, chlorine, manganese. The main differentiation is that your primary nutrients tend to go onto the ground in tens to hundreds of kilograms, and your micronutrients will go on in grams or sometimes even milligrams. So they're all very, very important in what they do, and they're all synergistic in what they do, and it's important to have an understanding of all of them and many, many other things. As a mining engineer coming in, we've started with a small phosphate project, and I'll give you an update on that. I want to give you a brief description of two opportunities that are sitting in front of us to follow on from that: NPK blending and distribution, and what I like to call, what the world likes to call zero carbon green ammonia, but in our context here, I like to call it local for local green ammonia, and I'll explain why and how that could be important for this country. And finally, a small boast at the end about the work that we're doing with the IFDC on the clumsily named AFFPP program, which stands for the Angolan Farm Fertiliser Productivity Program. And you may have heard that somebody tried to come to my door just then, because I'm giving this presentation at home, and I have no control over that, so I'm going to ignore it, and you'll probably hear a doorbell go again. Thank you. So firstly, the Cabinda Phosphate Project. I'll give you a little bit of walkthrough. So the large white square up here on the right-hand side is the mining license area that we were granted by public tender last year. It was very difficult to formalise the grant of that process due to the pandemic, but we're here and we have that granted and we've marked that out, and we're doing some work on it. We travelled down this dual lane sealed road, which I can drive on at 100 kilometres an hour until I get to the town of Cabinda. And we get close to the Cabinda port, which is currently being redeveloped. And we drive on past the Cabinda port up to the port of Takao, which is currently being developed, a much larger deep water port. And we get to the Fatilla industrial zone, where we were recently allocated 20 hectares of land to undertake our activities. Interesting things that are happening. We just marked out the license. We just finished yesterday loading a bulk sample into a container, and the bulk sample will head across to the US for further testing on granulation. And I think, just had an ore body model completed by SRK to revise in preparation for the mine plan that's gone off to Ology, who will finalise the mine plan, and we'll have a new ore body model announced shortly, and a new resource model announced shortly, and also mine plans and tenders and things like that we need to work on. Really interesting what's happening at the port. When I left before the tender, we were really sweating on Port of Takao. The development of that stopped, partly due to oil prices, partly due to activity, the COVID. It has restarted. It wouldn't get up in time for us to be using it, but it will get up in time for our stage 2, which is when we do need it. When I returned here, I was really surprised to find the government had started a redevelopment of the Cabinda port, which will make that useful for us from day one, and that should commission before we do. The most interesting development, I guess, is that when we tendered for this project, I think MAP was trading at about $270. By the time we did our scoping study, I think it was $470. I think it's now $670, and in some Atlantic export warehouses it's at $780. So we probably tendered for the project when phosphate prices were very close to the lowest they'd been for a decade and a half. The granulation plant, it's going to be a very flexible operation. We'll be able to utilise phosphate rock, water-soluble phosphate, secondary nutrients, micronutrients, and that's a big advantage of generating just one granule inside the country, because the country doesn't do any. If you do one granule, then you can include the secondary micronutrients, and that's very, very beneficial in making sure that you have more than just the NPK going into your market. And you can also customise to suit which particular crop, which particular soil, which particular climate area you're targeting inside the country. We're planning to build it in 3 phases. We'll start with a small plant at 150,000 tonnes, and even that will only operate at a third of capacity to commence, and we'll gradually phase up to meet the market as we generate the market. FECO have already started fabricating the key components inside the plant, inside the big green shed, and we've got this other bulk sample heading across, which will go to the International Fertiliser Development Centre in the US, and they will run some larger scale pilot plant test work, which will give us more refined data and process control data for what we want to do, and more importantly, some material to send back so that we can continue with our field trials and demonstrations here. So on the back of the phosphate, it's important to understand, I hope that you do already, that we need N and we also need K. And to that, we've identified in the country, there's three major types of market. There's what we call the grow to eat market, which is mainly subsistence farmers. There's probably 3 million of them, 10 million hectare area, probably farming 5 million hectares, 1 to 2 hectares each. The vast majority of them would not use any fertiliser at all, and they would get a maize yield per hectare of less than 1 tonne per hectare on average, compared to commercial crops in Brazil, where they'll be targeting 10 tonnes per hectare or more. This is the target. This is our first target market, and where we're working with the IFDC, and we want to expand that and meet 1 million smallholders within 5 years. And I'd like to think that we can meet more, because the government already has some good systems in place for communicating with them. The grow to sell sector is an emerging area of smaller, medium-sized commercial farms that are mainly set up to supply the food market in the country itself, supermarkets and food processors. It's a small sector and not well developed, and that's evidenced by the fact that Angola still imports a lot of its food, and given the amount of land that it has available and the amount of rain that it gets, it really shouldn't have to do that. And the last sector is grow to export, and there's a lot of opportunity here, but the sector is virtually non-existent. Angola was a large exporter in the past, and we'll talk to that a little bit later. So none of these things are really out of reach of what we would expect. Importantly, these numbers come from the IFDC's presentation that we had at our recent stakeholder engagement session here in Luande, and they think it's possible to grow this market in 10 years to well over 1 million tonnes per annum of fertiliser. That would be a major transformation of this country and this region. We've split it up into different distribution corridors in the context of the MPK, and that's based on where the ports are and where the rail and the road run from each one. And the first one is where our project actually is up here in, I'm not sure whether you can see my cursor, but if you can, up here in Cabinda. And there's a corridor there that services a couple of railway lines and a couple of roads that service into Republic of Congo and Democratic Republic of Congo. While I'm looking at that map, if you weren't aware, Cabinda is an exclave of Angola. So it is actually separated from Democratic Republic of Congo by a little sliver of Democratic Republic of Congo along the Congo River there, which is an interesting fact if you're ever at a quiz night. The corridors in Angola are a little bit different. The first corridor that we're looking at here is what we call the grow to export corridor. And these are large tracts of land that are largely unutilised, but it's serviced by a railway line, goes inland by about 300-400 kilometres. Importantly, there's diamond mines, some of the bigger diamond mining areas in Angola are out here, and the copper mines in DRC, copper belt is just across the border there. The grow to wheat sector is serviced by two corridors, Lobito and Namib. Corridors, and then there's a little one in the middle where the grow to sell is, and it's not really serviced by either of them, but possibly could be serviced by both. I want to look now in a little bit more detail, first at grow to wheat, which is where we start, and secondly at grow to export, where we're exploring some of our next, some of the next opportunities that are coming off the CAD rank. So the grow to wheat corridor, or Benguela Namib corridors, they both have a port. Lobito, Namib, they both have a railway line, the Benguela railway line, the Moçambique railway lines. There's 3 million small farmers here in this area here, which is approximately 10 million hectares. There's an MPK, actually there's two MPKs, another one just commissioned with two other companies here, and we'll be looking forward to introducing them to the IFDC to see if they can assist with the blending for the products that the IFDC needs to make to service these smaller holders that exist in this area. There is no MPK plant on this route, but that railway line is very interesting. Its main use now is to bring dimension stone to the port, and all the trains go back empty. So from somebody who wants to bring fertiliser to that port and send it back up into that corridor, that's extremely interesting for us. The Melange Corridor, very interesting. It's analogous to the Cerrado in Brazil, same latitude, same rainfall, well over a metre a year, 1,500 kilometres closer to the port and a lot closer to Asian markets. These two areas here, this one is called, the one on the left is the Melange Plateau, and the one on the right is the Kassange Basin. There's slightly different agricultural domains that you would treat separately. Together, they make up 6 million hectares. of what I've labelled underutilised land. But I would say that probably 95%, maybe 90 to 95% of that land is unutilised. The vast majority of it is unoccupied. This is a unique opportunity in the world where there's so much arable land with so much rainfall, with so much infrastructure, with so many people available. I find it amazing. In addition, right in the middle of that, which has attracted our attention, is hydropower stations. Angola generates most of its power from hydro, and it's just commissioned some new stations there recently. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. So that's where we think there's no NPK plant in that area yet either, which is a deficiency that we hope to rectify going forward. But I want to talk a little bit more about the significance of the hydropower stations and that corridor. Angola holds hydropower. At the moment, they have over 3,000 megawatts of hydropower generation, of which about 1,000 megawatts is unutilised because the projects for the distribution have not happened yet. And the tariffs are very, very cheap on a world scale. For industrial users, $15 a megawatt hour. And I'm interested, and we're having discussions about the opportunity for a local ammonia plant using that electricity, that surplus electricity. And I think there's concessions that will be available on that industrial tariff to help us out. To put it in language that you're paying your bill with at home, that's interesting. I still call Australia home, even though I'm stuck here. So that's a good sign. My wife will be pleased to hear that. So to put it in the context of what you have at home, $15 is 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So I'm pretty sure that will be cheaper than what any of you are paying. The interesting thing is you could make this ammonia right in the middle of a growing agriculture and mining region. And ammonia is the base for fertiliser, and it's also the base for ammonium nitrate, which is needed for explosives and rock fragmentation in the mining industry. What's important for local ammonia? It's important that it's green, obviously for the planet, that's important. But what's important from a people and prosperity point of view is if you produce it locally at the market gate, the increased cost of using electricity rather than the usual process of gas is well offset by the elimination of shipping, port, and thousands of kilometres of land transport. So it presents a very, very interesting opportunity where the feedstock is already available, it's already cheap, and there's an emerging market for it. I'm sure many of you have seen things like this, how we're changing from, gas ammonia to, or even coal ammonia. There's a thing as black ammonia, and gas ammonia, which is grey, and then gas ammonia, gas-produced ammonia, where the hydrogen comes from the steam, which sequesters the CO2 rather than emitting it. And then there's low CO2 emissions. And then, of course, if you can use your wind or your hydro or your solar to produce the electricity, then you don't have any emissions at all. The simple process is you take air, you take water, and you take renewable electricity, and you can make ammonia. And the ammonia is the feedstock, as I said, for all the nitrogen fertilizers, mining explosives, and there's a store of hydrogen energy for the new age. But we're mainly focusing at this stage on using the existing uses in the local context. To give you some idea, I think $15 a megawatt hour is equivalent to paying $4 for gas. So most nitrogen plants or ammonia plants are utilising $1 or $2 gas. But you can, as I said, you can offset that if we can get a lower price. What's interesting for me is, if you look at the gas price now, gas prices are going up all over the world, and I think that will be inevitable as we go forward. As we close down coal-fired power stations, there will be more. Some of that will be replaced by gas on a lower emissions basis, and that will keep the gas price higher for longer, I believe. We're seeing Henry Hub now at $4, where traditionally it's at around $2, and we're seeing the same thing happening in Europe. So we're seeing a change in the world and a change in its structure, and I think it will favour these green ammonia positions.
Excuse me, Lindsay.
Angola's yes.
Sorry, excuse me. We're running a little over time, so if you could try and wrap up in the next minute, please.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Angola's agricultural potential is huge. It was a large exporter, and it can be a large exporter again. It has people, it has area, but it imports 100% of its fertiliser. this gives some context. The lines at the top are international countries. The lines below are sub-Saharan African countries. Angola is fourth from the bottom. It has all that land and no nutrients. What we're doing with the International Fertiliser Development Centre is to actually firstly bring the nutrients, but secondly create the link between the nutrients, the soils, the crops, the markets and the policy. All of those things need to be linked together, and then you can make lasting and meaningful change. You can have those positive effects that we see for the planet and the people and their prosperity. And that's our dream and that's our vision, and that's where we want to stay. So sorry for not being able to make eye contact. Sorry for running a little bit over time because I can't see that little clock in front of the podium. And I'll leave you all now to go and have your drinks, and hopefully I'll be able to stay online if there's any questions. Thank you very much.